Hi friends, I'm Anna. Thanks so much for being here today. Today I want to share with you some really creative and unique ways to use the blending brushes or sponges that you have in your collection. If you don't have blending brushes quite yet, you can do these same things with sponges, but I've been playing around with it, came up with some really creative ways to use them, and I hope you'll stick around to watch. At the end, we'll talk a little bit about life, so let's get started. The techniques I'm showing today all use dyes and embossing along with the blending brushes. So I thought I'd show you quickly the set I'll be using for this: Simply Zinnia and the Zinnia embossing folder. Now, so what we're going to do for our first technique is this. I created these die cuts with the Simply Zinnia die set, and I took each one of them and I applied some multi-purpose glue to the back. I love this glue for lots of reasons. One of the reasons is if you put it on and you let it dry, it becomes a removable adhesive. So I can put these on here now. Sometimes if I put them directly on, that stick is a little bit too strong and it will tear my paper when I remove it. So here's what I do. After the glue is dry, I just put it onto my thing a few times to pick up lint. I still want it to be sticky, but not so sticky that it's going to tear my paper. So I do that several times and then apply it to my project. Now I did put glue on all of the petals on these flowers. If any of them are loose, as I go over them with my blending brushes, they can bend and pull back, and I don't really want that to happen. So I did try to make sure I got glue onto all of them. So what I'm going to do for this first one, I put this on, and I am just going to blend over the top. So if you would like just kind of a general introduction to blending brushes, how to use them, how to take care of them, storage, all kinds of things like that, I will link in the video description below to a video where I explained all of those things and just did a nice introduction on different ways to use them and things. Today, we are just going to focus on some really fun techniques. So what I'm going to do, I'm blending over each of these flowers. Now I could do this and try and make the color even all over the background. What I'm going for here is a darker color of ink around the center of the flowers, and then getting lighter as I go outward from those flowers. This is crumb cake ink. I debated whether I wanted to use the pink or the purple I'm going to be using on some of these others, and I decided to stick with the neutral here. Sometimes I just really like neutrals on my cards, so that's what we're doing for this one, okay? So I could keep going. If I used a darker color of brown ink, I would get a darker result quicker without using a lot of elbow grease to keep applying more of that light color. But here, as I remove this, you can see the look underneath where those flowers had been. So what I'm going to do for each of these techniques, I'll go through and I'll show you the techniques. Then I'm going to take a quick break and we will come back and I'll show you the finished cards that I am going to create from them. So let's move on to technique number 2. Now for these next few, I have used the Zinnia embossing folder. I already embossed a piece of cardstock. This one is Lemon Lolly is the color. And I am going to use my blending brushes to apply some color over the top here to those raised areas. Now you always want to make sure you blot off the color after you pick some up onto some scrap paper so you don't end up with any dark spots on your project. And now I am just lightly going to start going over those flowers. So I'll do the flowers first. This is Berry Burst ink that I'm using. After I do the flowers, then I will go back over the leaves and the stems with another color. I'll pick up a little bit more ink. What's so fun about this is you can play around with it. You can apply more ink, you can use lighter and darker colors, you can stick with monochromatics. Like I could do this whole thing with this Berry Burst color if I wanted to. Just for fun, I'm going to apply This is Pretty Peacock. It's kind of a blend between blue and green, but I love it. It's the color I decided to use on all of these. And actually, I had decided I want to use my mini blending brush for this because these areas with the greens, some of them are pretty small. Now, one of the things with the small blending brushes is I try to be extra careful with how much pressure I'm applying because I can end up with spots and blobs just a little bit easier, I have found, than with the big ones. So I'm being extra careful with how much pressure I'm applying. But we'll just go over, and what you'll find with this, if you haven't done this before, is those raised areas are going to pick up the ink a little bit more than the flat pieces of your paper. Okay, so I could keep going over that. I can make it darker if I wanted to, but I am going to stop like that. I like the subtle look of that. So let's look at the next one. The next one is similar. I'm going to leave this one here actually. Very similar, but what I've done is I flipped my cardstock over. So this direction, those flowers and leaves pop up out of the paper. If I flip it up over, now we have the side where it has actually been pressed downward. So let's use a little bit different colors here. We'll still use that same Pretty Peacock. But for this one, I am going to use my Blackberry Bliss. It's an absolute favorite color of mine. I love purple, as you know if you watch along. But this deep color of purple is just so pretty. So we'll go over the flowers. And what you'll get here is just a little bit different look. When you flip that embossing over, you have the emboss side and then you have the deboss side when you flip it, but you just get a little bit different look. And so far, I think I am actually liking this side a little bit better. So let's bring that Pretty Peacock back in. We'll go over these. I just had to take a half a second break. I think that is the first time I have ever sneezed while making a video, and I don't think you all wanted to hear that, so took a little break. I am back. You'll have to let me know what you think about the Pretty Peacock. I was debating whether to go with a true green, but I thought this peacock color would look nice. Okay. So let's get that out of the way so we can look at these two samples side by side. Okay, so we have the emboss side and then the deboss side. So you play around with that. Now here is another really fun embossing technique you can try. And I have shared this before. I have not shared it with this particular embossing folder. But what you want to find is the side that the design is raised up and coming out of it's raised up. Okay, so when you open your folders, if you are using Stamp It Up folders, it is going to be this side, and here is what I'm going to do. I'll do a little bit of this, but then you'll see the finished result right here. So pick up some Berry Burst ink and apply this to the flowers. Now I did this to the whole piece when I made this one. Then I got a little bit of Blackberry Bliss and applied that just right in the centers of the flowers. And actually, when I was using a circular pattern, I found that it was almost taking more ink off than it was putting on. So then I started doing more of like a dabbing motion, and that seemed to leave more ink on the folder. So you can play around with that, with how you're actually applying the ink. And then I went back through right in between, and on those leafy areas and the stems, I applied some of that Pretty Peacock ink. So after that, I laid my cardstock, my plain piece of cardstock that was not yet embossed. I laid it over here on the uninked side, closed it, and ran it through my embossing machine. And this is what I ended up with. So isn't that nice? You could play around with what color of cardstock you use on this one. Like, You could use one of these other colors to start and then do this. And it's a similar look to this, but just a little bit different because that ink is mainly only on those raised parts of the folder, whereas these techniques get more of that ink in between the areas as well. Okay, so we have done several of these now. Let's move on to another one. Now let's actually bring this stamp in here. And we are going to apply ink right onto the stamp itself. So I just got some Berry Burst ink. You can play around, again on this, you can play around with whether you are smearing and using that circular pattern or if you're doing more of a dabbing. I am doing more of a dabbing right now. Add a little bit of Blackberry Bliss. Now I'll get that pretty peacock. And for this one, again, maybe I should be using my smaller blending brushes to be able to get in that little space a little bit better without getting it on top of the flowers. Something you want to keep in mind when you're doing this is I try to apply the ink colors on this and on that embossing folder from light to dark. And the reason is, let's say I applied my shaded spruce or my pretty peacock first, that dark green color, and then I come back in with my pink blending brush may pick up some of that dark green color. I don't want that to happen, so I always apply the colors from lightest to darkest. If my green blending brush picks up just a little bit of that pink, I figure it probably isn't going to cause any problems, so that's why I applied it in that order. So what you're going to get with this is a really subtle effect, really nice and light. Isn't that pretty? Definitely different from if we would just ink the stamp and stamp it the normal way, but just kind of a fun technique that you can play with. Next, now we're going to play with some die cuts a little bit. I think we're done with that embossing folder, and let's play with the die cuts. So what I've done here, I stamped that zinnia stamp. I put some of the glue on the back of this, let it dry like I said. Then I put this against my clothing to pick up some of that lint so that I don't tear the card with the glue that's on the back, because live and learn, it's happened a few times. So now I am going to apply some ink over here, and let's see what we want to do with our colors. I am going to use this really light bubble bath color on the zinnias themselves. Do you like this zinnia stamp set? I am just loving this. I mean, I love flowers. Sure, you know that if you watch along with my videos. We do lots of pretty girly things in these videos. But I love the zinnia. I'm going to go with a really light blending of that bubble bath here. Now I'm going to bring in that pretty peacock brush again, and I blotted off some of the extra ink just to make sure it wasn't. I didn't want a real dark color here with my really light flower, so we'll just add that. And this is always my favorite part when I'm blending with any kind of mask or dye, is it looks really light, it looks very subtle, and then when you remove it, it's always more dramatic than you would expect. Okay, so here we got those colors filled in. I think that's a really neat look. So I'll turn that into a card and be at the end here and come back and show you the finished look. So now we're going to do the opposite with this one. So I am going to cover this up. And now, what color is under here? Blackberry Bliss, right? Okay, so we're going to blend some more Blackberry Bliss over the top. And for this one, I am going to work my way from the outer edges inward. And I see a few darker spots around the edge where I started. I probably had some excess ink on my brush, and should have blended a little bit more of that off before I started, but that's okay. Once I keep blending, typically those darker spots will disappear as everything just kind of blends together. So this is one of the things I love to do with blending brushes, is to create darker and lighter areas where maybe the outside of the card is darker and it gets lighter as I move inward, or maybe it's darkest at the bottom and as I move up the card it gets lighter. But I'm going to go back around here and apply just a little bit more of the outsides because I want that outside edge to be noticeably darker than the center. And then we will remove that die cut and we'll see what we have. One more edge. Isn't this Blackberry Bliss ink just beautiful? I just love this color. Okay, let's remove this. And here you can see what this one is looking like. So I love that you can get kind of a layered effect. Looks like we have 2 layers here when really we don't. We just have one piece. I stamped it, blended it, and did not do any die cutting besides what I used for the blending here. And these, of course, you can reuse these several times, probably more than several times. Here for this one, I have gone ahead and I stamped this zinnia with crumb cake ink. We are going to add some ink to it and use it just the way it is. So I'm going to use some of this Berry Burst ink. I'm sticking with the same colors here. So this is something fun you can do if you stamp an image and you want to add color to it, but you don't want to use markers, or maybe you don't want to take a lot of time, or I know we have quite a few stampers who have shaky hands and different problems with your hands staying stable. This is an option that you can use to color in some of those images. So again, I grabbed my smaller blending brush. We have 2 different sizes, and so this is going to look similar to the others, but a little bit different. So let me grab those and bring them back in, and we'll look at some of our different samples quickly. Then I want to take just a quick break, and I will be right back to show you my finished cards. So here are those ones with the stamped flower. Here we have the 3 with the embossing. And we have this one that we created the background with. So give me a second, I'll be right back. So let's take a look at these. I had a lot of fun finishing these, and I'm excited to show them to you. So here is the card. See the background? That was the very first sample I created, and then I ended up combining it with this piece on top. So if you see that background, I covered up more of it than I really intended to, but hey, this is what I created with it. But so we have that nice background with the blending, and then this piece on top where I had added the color to the stamp image with the blending brushes. Let's look at those embossed ones next. I really love how these turned out. So I ended up using a couple of pieces of that zinnia designer paper that is so pretty. And I'm definitely going to have to create some cards where I don't cover up as much as this, but I really like that bright pop of color around the edges. I added some of this metallic woven ribbon to a few of my cards, and also some of those nice adhesive back sequins as well to add just a little bit of embellishment. So there's that one. This one, we just stuck with that purple. Love the colors on this one, and that simple greeting across the front. All of these greetings were also in that Simply Zinnia set. I used some of the glimmer papers to add a little bit of interest. Really like to add some sparkle to some of these. This one was very plain, and I was debating like, okay, what do I do with this? Should I stamp something around the edges? I just blended a little bit more color around the edge, stamp that greeting down there, and we have just a very simple card that I created in several minutes. This one, I added the greeting down here and a bow. I love how simple these are turning out. I don't know if I realized when I started this how simple these cards would really be. Most of them are just one layer, really. So this one, I just stamped the greeting and added those sequins, and this one is one layer as well. So I hope you enjoyed seeing these card projects today, all these blending techniques. Stick around. Let's chat for a minute about life. Do I look like I need therapy? Do I just like radiate this aura of like, wow, Anna, you need therapy? The reason I ask, I have been getting all of these commercials on the music app that I listen to on my phone. Since the beginning of the year, it's been telling me that the beginning of the year is a great time not to start and try and be like a new person, but to build on the success that you're already making with therapy. Now, I want to say right now, there is nothing wrong with therapy. I have participated in marriage counseling multiple times in my life. And whatever tools we have available in this world that help us to be happier, healthier, better people, we should take advantage of those if we can. So I just want to say that I am not in any way, shape, or form saying that therapy is bad, saying that we shouldn't use it, that anyone should be ashamed. No, none of that. But I've just been laughing because I am getting like nonstop commercials, advertisements about therapy. Like, wow, they must really think I need therapy bad. And I was just thinking the other day, you know, those sayings, I really mess up sayings in a lot of cases. So if I get the words wrong, then I'm sorry. I should have looked it up, I guess, before I started. But the sayings, I imagine you've heard them about, like, have you prayed about it as much as you've talked about it? Or have you prayed about it as much as you have worried about it? And I'm thinking, have we prayed about it as much as we have therapied? I'm going to make that a word. Therapied about it. Have we prayed about it as much as we have therapied about it? Now, counseling, therapy, I've participated in it. It's helpful. It's important at various times in our lives. But have I ever sat in a therapy session and experienced immediate healing from something that like all of a sudden, like, wow, how did that happen? Like, that just got fixed like in an instant and I have no idea how. No, that's never happened. Has that happened when I've been praying? Yeah, that has happened on several occasions in my life. And I know that a lot of you have experienced that as well. So for the things that we are really struggling in life, if we need to participate in counseling, therapy, any of the things, and it helps us, that's fantastic. But when we are dealing with our problems in life and leaving our ultimate healer out of it and not including those things in our prayers, that's probably something we should reconsider, because when he wants to, he can exert his immediate healing power. And if you have not experienced that, I encourage you to take more things in prayer more often and believe in the power, because if you haven't experienced it yet, you absolutely can in time. Thanks for being here, friends, today. I really appreciate you. I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.